Peter Gregory Chadwick and Quee Choo Lynn met and started dating in college, more specifically at Arizona State University. They got married in 1991 and had 3 children together, the first in 1998, the second in 2002, and the third in 2004. Peter comes from a very wealthy family. He was born in Great Britain and also held American citizenship. Quee's family was also wealthy. The woman, who was born in the Asian country of Malaysia, was known as OC. As Peter became even more successful, they decided to move into a mansion in Newport Beach, California. The couple lived in a gated community, and the mansion was valued at $2.5 million. At the time of the events, Peter was 48 years old and a prominent real estate investor. The couple's eldest son lived and studied at a boarding school, while the 2 youngest lived with them. According to a neighbor named Heidi, Quee was a nice person who loved the Christmas festivities. In addition, she was seen as a hard-working woman who was very dedicated to her children. According to people close to the couple, Quee was completely in love with Peter and seemed to be very emotionally dependent on him. The woman thought the United States was very different from the place she was born, but she was getting a taste for the American way of life and starting to adapt. As for Peter, people said that he was a shy and very reserved person who hardly used to interact with others. On October 10, 2012, the couple's 2 children left school, took the bus, and went down a few blocks from home as they always did. They sat there for over an hour, waiting for their parents to show up and pick them up, but no one did. Upon seeing this, a neighbor went there and asked if they had called their parents, while the bus said they tried but no one answered. It was then that, realizing how strange that whole situation was, the neighbor decided to call the police. Upon arriving at the scene, the police contacted friends and family of the couple, as well as nearby hospitals in case they had an accident, but nothing was found. The boys were then taken to a family friend's house where they spent the night. Unable to find Peter and Quee, the police decided to enter the couple's mansion in search of clues. Inside, they came across some suspicious things. In the bathroom, they saw pieces of broken glass all around the bathtub. In addition, there are also drops of blood on the floor. The police also noticed that the safe of the house was ajar, and saw some signs that someone had hurriedly left there, which looked very suspicious. From the disappearance of both Peter and Quee and the evidence in the couple's mansion, the police began to work with the hypothesis that a crime had happened. According to detectives, there was evidence of a violent struggle at the mansion. The next day, October 11, 2012, near the US-Mexico border in the city of San Diego, Peter called 911 around 5:30 a.m. On the call, he seemed nervous and said they had taken her. The operator asked who he was talking about, and he replied that a guy broke into his house and took him there, and that they must be going to Mexico or somewhere else nearby. Still on the call, Peter said that someone had taken his wife's life and that those responsible were in a pickup truck.
911 emergency, this is Crystal.
Yeah, my wife.
Okay.
They took her.
Who took her?
The guy broke into my house. He drove me here. He had a friend. They've gone in a pickup truck.
Okay, so your wife did that.
She's.
He said that one of the men was named Juan, and that days before he had called that same man to make an estimate for painting his house. According to Peter, he was with Juan and his wife at home when he decided to go to his office. A few seconds later, he reportedly heard his wife screaming. As he ran upstairs, he said he saw Juan in his bathroom pushing his wife into the bathtub, which was full of water. Peter said he couldn't do anything, as Juan threatened him with a bladed weapon in case he tried something, so he had witnessed the whole crime being helpless. Peter further reported that after Juan took his wife's life, the man would have ordered him to help him take the body out of the bathtub and wrap it in a blanket. Afterwards, he said the man forced him to drive all night with his wife's body in the car. According to Peter, Juan met a man named Quee at a gas station, and that there, they took his wife's body out of the car and put it in a truck that he thinks went to Mexico. After that, the man would have gone away, leaving him alone with his car in an isolated parking lot. The police got security footage from the gas station where Peter made the call. In them, the man appears asking the attendant to use the phone and saying that someone would have taken his wife's life. After a few minutes, the police arrived and took Peter to the police station. There, detectives began to find inconsistencies in Peter's story. According to detectives, Peter said the crime happened around 11 a.m. the day before, but surveillance footage shows his vehicle leaving his gated community about 2.5 hours after that. The police also said that in the images recorded by the cameras at the entrance, it was not possible to see anyone in Peter's car who could be Juan that he pointed out as being responsible for the crime. Later that same day, Peter's vehicle was again filmed at a toll booth, and in the footage, it was also not possible to see any other man in the vehicle besides Peter. The police spoke to several people, but none of them had any idea who this Juan was, or could give any information related to this person. Furthermore, detectives stated that security camera footage in the area where Peter said Juan met with Quee showed that there was no other vehicles involved as stated by him. In addition to all these factors, Peter himself has some incriminating injuries. He had scratches on his neck and arms and bite marks on his forearm. About this, Peter claimed that the injuries were caused by a fight between him and Juan. Later, the police located and performed an expertise on Peter's car. In it, the police found a suitcase with only men's clothing inside, and organized it if someone had packed in a hurry. From then on, the police became even more suspicious of the version given by the man. According to detectives, during his initial statement, Peter was very strange. His story was very disjointed, and he went through a range of emotions: crying, moments of anxiety, and then complete silence. Detectives also said that throughout his contact with the police, Peter never asked about his children. This demonstrated that he was more concerned with his story, creating an alibi, than with his own children. On October 11, 2012, 6 hours after the police call, Peter Chadwick was arrested for the crime. After the arrest, Peter quickly sought out a lawyer and stopped talking to detectives. As Peter was the main suspect for the disappearance of his wife, who was possibly already dead, the police began to gather information to better understand the crime and its motivations. In conversation with a neighbor of the couple, the woman reported that one of the reasons for Peter to have committed the crime was that his wife wanted to be more independent and not have to stay in her husband's shadow anymore. Still, according to the neighbor, this may have awakened Peter's fury. Police discovered that days before the crime, Quee had scouted her husband's internet search history and noted down some of the things he looked for, including Asian call girls. Quee would have noted down these surveys to later confront her husband. The police also discovered that the man even went out with some call girls, and that later this was discovered by his wife. As the investigations progressed, it was clear that the couple was going through fights, and it's likely that they would talk about divorce. In testimony, a neighbor reported that he heard Quee screaming inside her home days before her disappearance. At the time, he decided not to report what happened to the authorities, imagining it was just a common couple fight. At his first hearing, Peter Chadwick pleaded not guilty. Meanwhile, the couple's 2 children were sent to live with Peter's uncle who lived in Los Angeles. 7 days after the man's arrest, detectives found a house on a mountain in Aurora, San Diego County, where they believe Peter spent the night of the murder. There was a large trash can, and several items from Quee were found, such as her ID, cards, and personal objects. All these things would have been taken to Mexico by the criminals according to Peter's version. After digging around a bit more, detectives found a body wrapped in a green blanket. After an investigation, it was confirmed that the body belonged to Quee Choo Lynn. According to the coroner, there were many signs of violence on the body, and the cause of death was due to a mechanical R suppression, in this case with the use of the hands. The discovery of Quee's body and the news that she had indeed been the victim of a crime quickly spread through the media. Even more so because everyone involved in this plot were rich people. Friends and family were very shaken by everything, and some still found it hard to believe that Peter could be responsible for the crime. Quee was 46 at the time of the events. She was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. Peter Chadwick was held in prison for 2 months while the prosecutor brought evidence against him. In December 2012, a bail amounting to $1 million was set, and Peter paid it and started to respond the process in freedom. At the time, the prosecutor in the case said he tried to stop bail, but the court had no choice, as Peter fit all the criteria to be entitled to that right. Also, according to the prosecutor, Peter had no criminal record and had an excellent record as a citizen. After being released, Peter returned home and started using his wife's car as his was impounded. This caused quite a stir among Quee's family and friends. He also sent out an email inviting people to a 100-day vigil at the mansion in Quee's honor, and this didn't go down well with people. 2 years passed with Peter Chadwick awaiting his trial in freedom. In the meantime, he moved to his father's house in the city of Santa Barbara, and all 3 of the couple's children ended up going to boarding school. Meanwhile, detectives believed they had an extremely solid case. They had a lot of circumstantial evidence, the victim's body, incriminating injuries, and the lack of coherence in the accused's story. The police were sure that Peter was the culprit and would be convicted of the crime. In 2014, Peter Chadwick was still awaiting his trial, and in the midst of the proceedings, he was appearing in court for the hearings as expected. However, when the trial date began to approach, the man disappeared. The police contacted Peter's lawyer, who said he didn't know where he was and had not been told anything. Immediately, authorities issued an alert and placed Peter as one of the most wanted men in the entire United States, entering the national top 15. Initially, the police even considered that he might have taken his own life. That's because his father, Michael Chadwick, said that Peter was very depressed and quite down on life the last few days. This theory, however, was eventually discarded. The police discovered that Peter had already been on the run for 3 weeks before they realized it, which gave him a huge advantage over the authorities. In a search carried out in the fugitive's room, the detectives found books that taught how to disappear, how to change identity, and how to leave false trails. Later, it was discovered by detectives that someone had made a call from the house Peter was living in to a taxi company requesting a service. Police were able to identify and locate the taxi driver who answered the call. In testimony, the man said that he transported a woman from Peter's house to an airport in Santa Barbara. But for the police, that woman was actually Peter in disguise. Police believe that after Peter arrived at Santa Barbara Airport, he changed his clothes and began to dress as a man again. That's because through images from the airport security cameras, it was possible to see Peter walking around the place, but there were no images of him arriving. Peter spent hours at the airport, but never got on a plane. Instead, he went back outside, got into another taxi and drove away. And that was the last anyone saw of Peter Chadwick before his escape. The search for Peter turned into a true international manhunt led by the US police. According to authorities, the man's escape was only successful because the amount of money he had at his disposal. At the time, Peter had about $1 million in cash with him. For the detectives who worked on the case from the beginning, the case slipped through the police's finger and took in a proportion they didn't like. They said they would like to close the case much sooner, but the accused ended up getting the better of them. During the hunt for Peter, detectives started getting tips from everywhere. Searches took place mainly in Japan, Canada, Belize, Panama, and Ukraine. Authorities were convinced that Peter was getting help from someone while he was on the run. A $75,000 reward was offered to anyone with information leading to Peter Chadwick's whereabouts. An agent involved in the manhunt said Peter was smart and had a good strategy. However, if they could pinpoint the source of help he was receiving, Peter would make some mistake and they could catch him. On August 4, 2019, Peter Chadwick was finally located and captured. He was near the city of Puebla, south of Mexico City, when he was arrested by the Mexican Federal Police. Upon being caught, Peter was quite surprised, as he believed this would never happen. The first question he asked was about how Ben, his eldest son, was doing. Peter was captured thanks to an anonymous tip that the US police wouldn't go into too much detail about. It is not known for sure where Peter Chadwick spent all his years on the run. When he was picked up in Mexico, he was living in an apartment in a small village near Puebla. His hideout was next to a country club. Over the years, the man had been changing his appearance so as not to be recognized. His hair got a little darker, he wore a goatee and tried to look a little younger. The police also believed that he had some plastic surgery to change small features on his face. Peter used several aliases, including Paul Cook, Paul Craig, and John Franklin. He had an identity card that was a copy of some fictitious security force. He presented himself to people as some kind of analyst with secret access, with his picture in his wallet. Despite the fake identity, Peter never got a fake passport, and this may have forced some changes in his lifestyle. He started his escape by staying in nice hotels, but changed his pattern when Mexico started changing some of his immigration laws, requiring visas for non-citizens when they checked into hotels. From there, Peter started looking for some discreet places that accepted cash and didn't require any identification. As for the money, the police believed that Peter lived most of the run by surviving on it, but did a few small things on the side, like teaching English to kids to earn some extra cash. He also worked waiting tables and in restaurant kitchens. Peter was extradited back to the United States, and in February 2022 his trial began. This time, he didn't try to dodge the accusations and decided to confess to the crime, saying he was sorry. Asked about the reasons that led him to commit the crime, he preferred to remain silent. After a few hours of deliberation, Peter Chadwick was sentenced to 15 years for the crime. Quee Choo Lynn's family and friends said the sentence was too low for the crime he committed. However, he didn't have much to do, as this conviction was due to the agreement he made with the prosecution. Currently, Peter Chadwick is at a California prison, and his 3 children are still trying to come to terms with the fact that they have lost their mother, and in a way, their father. Alright folks, that's it for today. Thanks for watching until the end, best wishes, and I see you next time.